and she was. But as time went on, the dives became a little more extensive. I'd have to stay out longer. We dove along the Channel Islands, which is Catalina, Santa Barbara, St. Nicholas, all the islands. And we'd have to stay out sometimes for a week or 2 weeks at a time. And this wasn't resonating with my wife and kids. They kind of wanted a dad at home, and my wife wanted a husband to clean up around the house. So anyway, I was out on a dive one day, and a dive boat from U.S. Divers Company pulled up with us. And I was young and reckless in those days, and I did a lot of unusual diving. I'd take on jobs that were relatively dangerous because they paid good, and I had a good reputation in the diving field. So these people from the dive boat had heard about me, and they asked if I would be interested in a research diver for U.S. divers. So I said, well, yeah, I'll come in and talk to you. So I went home and told my wife, and she said, well, yeah, that'd be better than what you're doing out there. You've been staying out too long. At least you'll be working in a lab. So the facility was in Santa Ana, California, and at that time we were living in Costa Mesa, California. It's all in one big Orange County down there. It's all relatively close together. And they put me in research and development department as a technician, and they gave me the many experimental jobs that I was solving quite regularly. I could see the simplicity because of my understanding in the way natural law works and the simplicity of natural law. They were overlooking a lot of the things that, by complications and academica, they were looking over a lot of things that were quite simple to solve. So they kind of liked what I was doing, and one day they invited me into the office and asked me if Jacques Cousteau, he was the one that started U.S. divers. He invented the aqualung, and he had a research vessel on the East Coast called the Calypso. You've probably heard of that. And they said that he's now interested in putting one on the West Coast, and would I be interested in being the head diver? So I thought that would be terrific and be more money and everything else. And they said, well, it's a while because we don't even have we've got the ship, but we haven't got it outfitted yet. So anyway, they said, well, go on back to what you're doing, and when we're ready, we'll incorporate you. So I went back to my research and development, and we'd go out for 2 and 3 days at a time. And my job at that time was the wraparound mask. They were developing from the old oval type mask to one that it would come all the way around your face. And my job was to eliminate the distortions on both sides of the masks so that you could see clearly, a lot clearer than they were. And I wasn't having any trouble with it. I mean, I was working out the kinks in it when one day I was, my valve on my tank, and I thought I had more air than I did, and I was down 250 feet with no air. So I had to come up in a hurry. And for those of you who've done any diving, you know that it's quite uncomfortable because all you do is exhale, exhale, exhale for it seems like an eternity. And luckily, I wasn't down there very long. I'd only been down there 2 or 3 minutes. So my layoff time, which is your decompression time, you're supposed to stop on the way up and press to eliminate the possibility of bends was nil. I didn't have to do that. So when my wife heard about that, she said, no, it's getting a little dangerous out there, and you're staying out again a little too long and so forth. But you're a natural tinkerer. You know, you go to garage sales and you pick up this junk and you put it together and you make things work. And I see here in the paper, there's an ad here for a research lab tech at a place called Advanced Kinetics in Costa Mesa, California. And why don't you go down there and see if you can get a job? You'll be, you know, it's only about 4 blocks away from our home, and I'd be home every night. And I explained to her I don't have those credentials. Remember, I know machine guns and mortars, and along with an 8th grade education, plus a year or two of college when I finally got through a rough high school, I didn't really have anything. And she said, well, go down there and see if you can start somewhere. And I agreed that it was something that was interesting to me. So so I did. I took what I had and I went down. It happened to be at lunchtime when I got there. And there wasn't anybody there, no receptionist and nobody around. And I went down the halls, hello, hello, and no answer. And I went by the director's office. His name was Dr. Weinhardt. And he saw me walking by and asked me what I was doing. And I told him I was looking for a job. And he said, well, they're all out to lunch. Come back later. And I said, okay. And then he said, well, wait a minute, come in here, let's talk. He said, what are your qualifications? I said, well, I know a little bit about machine guns and stuff. And he said, well, you know, we're not kind of into that. What else do you do? And I said, well, I'm really been a student of natural law all my life. I know lots of things that work on the essence of simplicity. Everything I look at, I can almost see the diametrically opposed simplicity of it. I mean, everything, to me, is quite simple if you look for it. And I told him about the bumblebee and my interest in magnetics. Since I was a kid, I was interested in magnetics, and we live in a whole sea of energy. Magnetics is everywhere. It's the essence before you get to electromagnetics, before you get to electricity, before you get to power and energy, you have magnetics. It's a constant throughout all of the universe. It's a real power. Before it becomes energy, it's a power. So I guess he liked what I was talking about with magnetics and said, well, you know, we had an engineer quit last week that was working on one of our projects, which is magnetics. Would you be interested? And I said, well, sure, but I haven't filled out. He said, well, if you're interested, go to work and we'll take care of the details later. Come in tomorrow morning and go to work. So okay, that's great. And I went home and told my wife, and she was happy about that idea, and I was too. I thought, well, this is going to be good, and the pay was pretty good. So I kind of moved away from the diving and got more and more into research and development in this facility. And my job at the time was to, they had a setup. I had my own, and they had a cathode ray tube, which is like your television set that fires electrons. And my job, and they had big magnets, controllable, so I could control the power of the magnets. A giant oscilloscope, a high-speed Polaroid camera, and my job was to try and get just one electron through the field. I guess I blew it. My wife's always on me about this. I do this. This is only the second time I spoke, so I hope you forgive me because I'm not used to this yet. I will get someday, but anyway. I'm sorry. Huh? I want to go back to where I was. How do I do that? Oh. Okay. That's simple. Okay, thanks. Anyway, so my job was to get one electron through the field, just one, from point A to point B without deflection, without it going either to the negative or the positive side of the magnet. And Dr. Weinhardt explained that we got Boulder Dam, we got all the power in the world, so about increasing it, and just keep forcing this little guy through the field until we get one across. And the object was, at that time, they were exploring what in scientific terms was called the rivers, magnetic rivers of space, vortices in space, just whirling magnetic fields. And they wanted to know if they could use magnetics to traverse these fields, these rivers in space. And in order to do that, we have to get an electron through this field without being deflected. So I worked at it for quite a while, and I was shooting up rolls and rolls of boxes and boxes of Polaroid film every day. The experiment was probably at least $1,000 a day, and that was quite a bit of money. And I wasn't getting anywhere. I couldn't get an electron through the field. So I looked at it and said, no, there's a simpler way. I knew there was a simpler way. There always is. There always is, without exception, a simpler way to do things. So, so I got kind of bored, and I started looking at the other things in the lab that they were doing, and the next to me was working on levitation. And what that consisted of was just a giant coil. In those days, they were called igliotrons, and it's just an iron core with copper windings. And they would take a steel ball and put it on top of the coil and fire it up, and they'd levitate the ball for 4 to 8 minutes and burn up the coil. And they'd go check another one out in supply. Well, they were running about $400 a copy, and they were checking out, oh gosh, 8, 10, 12, 15 a day, trying to get, somewhere with levitation. I never saw them get higher than about 3 to maybe 6 inches was the highest they ever got it, and they weren't getting anywhere with that. So I could see the simplicity in that too, that there's many forms of levitation. He does it every day, one way or another. We just don't see it. So I went home and pulled out all my junk from garage sales and put them on the living room floor, and I built up a replica of my experiment. I took magnets, and I took a television apart, got a cathode ray tube out, and I had remembered when I lived that the way nature runs water from a snow cap to the ocean is she's always meandering, going like this all the way down. It's never ever in a straight line. You'll never see, it's asymmetrical. So I said, well, that's easy. These guys are trying to use brute force to force this little electron, and by that time they'd become my friends. And I was talking, and I said, I'll get you through the field, don't worry. And I fired it up, and God's truth on the first shot, by spiraling it in a vortex, by pulsing, they call it pulsing, I got the first electron through the field without deflection. And after that, I took 20, 30 more times to make sure that everything was working. There was no problem at all. And what it was, giving this little electron a chance to do its own thing, the way it would like to go through the field instead of trying to force it. So I thought, oh boy, here comes a raise. I'm going to go in and get a raise for this. Well, the other thing I was interested in was, and we were working on lasers at that time. This was in the infancy of lasers, and we were even working on with Bell Laboratory of teleportation. But they were using flies in bell jars and trying to transfer them and so forth. Well, that'll come later. I'll tell you about that. But I took these two experiments. The other one was the levitation. I remember reading in Tibet the way they used to lift heavy blocks, tons, up in the air, drums and long horns, and they'd create a resonance. And as the resonance reached the frequency of the block, it reached 0 point, and these blocks would go up the side of the mountains. All day long, they raised these blocks up. So that was one form of levitation called acoustical levitation, by sound waves or frequencies. Basically, there's only one form, but it's dissected in frames of reference by terminology, by semantics. People call it different things, but it's really only one simple thing. It's just whenever you vibrate anything, it's like the opera singer can hit a high C and break a glass. It's like a guitar on one end of the room can strike a G chord on the other guitar on the other side of the room. It's the same thing. You reach the resonant frequency and you vibrate that. And there's a tremendous amount of activity when you understand resonance. So I took a 15-inch woofer speaker and put it on my living room floor. My wife was trying to step around it, and my kids were going crazy. But in the interim, I was experimenting with different materials, and I wound up with a ping pong ball, and I put it in the center of the cone, and I had an audio amplifier. And I kept playing with it until I reached, I think it was about 28 hertz or 28,000 cycles per second. This ping pong ball would stand up and just levitate in the center of the cone. And that's similar to if you've ever seen the water, you get the right water with a ball on top, you can levitate the ball even though it's quite heavy. Or you can take a hairdryer and levitate a ping pong ball. They're different forms of levitation, but they're still levitation. So anyway, I wrote up my experiments. I took lots of pictures, different angles and different ways of showing them what I was doing. And I went in to see Dr. Weinhardt. And I told him, I said, I think I'm going to get a raise here. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, what we're doing, and we're spending thousands of dollars a day, I think, and I'm not an engineer, but we can turn this over to the engineers. I think I found something that if we modify, if we start building on these ideas, I think we can get somewhere. And he said, well, what is it? Come on in. So I went in and shut the door, and I showed him what I did, and I told him the utter simplicity of it. There's nothing to it. It's simple. And he looked at it, and he said, Ralph, you don't understand. This is a government-funded research and development laboratory. And we're paid to look for answers, not find them. So I think that was that's when my heart dropped into my stomach. I couldn't believe, I didn't even know where I was. I thought, on this planet, you earn the right by progressively making things easier and better on all levels, and you get rewarded and you go up, and you can take care of your family. Well, he said, no, 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 no. He said, I didn't really think you'd get into this, and I do know it's that simple, Ralph. I understand where you went, what you're doing, but I'm going to have to shred this and tell you to go back to work, because this is not happening. It can't happen. Well, I was really, really upset, because that was my whole field of interest. I couldn't go back to machine guns, and my diving career was, not looking so good. So anyway, I did. I went back to work, and I worked another 2 weeks, just totally bored watching these guys and watching my experiment, and I just couldn't take. I remember going in with tears in my eyes the day I quit. I said, I'm sorry, I just can't do this anymore. It's just using brute force. You're not getting anywhere, and you're spending your wheels. You're spending all the taxpayers' money on things that will never work. So I didn't want to go home that night, but I did. And I told my wife, and she invited me to think about what I was going to do next. So, and I had no idea, but I had met a guy, and he belonged to a group called Understanding. This is in Costa Mesa, California, and it was created by Daniel Fry, who you've heard on some of the talks earlier about Daniel Fry. He created the group of Understanding for the sole purpose of people coming together and brainstorming, sharing ideas, and effectively trying to progress our level of knowledge to where we could find the truth and not be kept in the dark by what we were told, but probe deep enough until we found out what was really going on with things. And he said, well, I said, well, you sure they're going to want to listen to somebody like me? And they said, oh, yeah, we would. I said, well, I'm okay. So I went to their meeting. Very warm, loving, friendly people. I'd never met anybody like that before. They were just wonderful people. And they allowed me to be who and what I was, which is just a kind of a hillbilly with a yen for natural law and know how to put things together that make them work. And I told them my story. And my interest has always been, since I was a kid, to see, in fact, I've heard people talk about missions, and if it comes under that category, that would be my mission in life, to see floating homes. And so your home and your habitation can be one thing, and then later floating cities, and then later floating countries, etc. And with my inherent knowledge of natural law and levitation, I didn't see a problem, except that people were telling me that you can't do this. This isn't going to work. And they said, oh, no, 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 no. We've got another guy that thinks like you. His name is Otis Carr. And he's in Oklahoma City right now demonstrating spaceships. And I said, oh, okay. That gets things off the ground. That sounds like it's, you know. So they said, well, we'd like you guys to get together, because if both of you could come together on the same page, I think you can really affect a change. So I said, is that me? No. Okay, sorry. So I said, okay, they said, well, he's having trouble in Oklahoma. He just ran a demonstration, and around the periphery of the craft he was demonstrating, the seal, instead of interlocking them together, which we learned later that simply by interlocking them there's no leaks, he had pressed them together. And at that time we had moving parts. We had two moving parts, and because of the rotation inside the craft, we were using mercury inside the craft at that time, or he was, not me. And the mercury came out all over the laboratory and affected him. He had to go into the hospital with it. And everybody at that time was opposed to what he had to offer. He just wanted to see spaceships. And he said it's very simple and very easy. It's natural law. You don't split the atom. You learn to live with the atom and work with the atom. And everything from that point on, if you follow it, it leads you to success. And they said, no, you can't build these things. Same thing I got at Advanced Kinetics, that they didn't want his ideas. So, make a long story short, the understanding group invited Carr and his entourage. He had about 6 or 7 engineers and a PR man, Wayne Aho, and Aho was his brother, who I mentioned earlier, Dennis Repoldi, or Norman Colton. They were invited out to California and to the understanding group to see if we could get together and effectively get something out to the public before we were told that it doesn't work that way. So Carr and his entourage came out, and we had some wonderful meetings for a few days, and then they had to decide what we were going to do. One of the members had a cabin at Lake Arrowhead, which is down by Riverside, California, by San Bernardino, and they had a large cabin. And they said, well, why don't you guys go on up there? There was plenty of room. And brainstorm and see what you would like to do, and we'll find you a place to operate. So we thought that was great. Well, Carr and I, it was magic. We hit it off. We were on the same page from day one until we eventually had to disperse. But we got into magnetics and what he was calling ether technology, which is the understanding of magnetics and how it works. And it's all natural law. He had different terminology for things than I did, but we were basically on the same page. And while we were up in Arrowhead, we had gone over and modified many of his ideas, and he was modifying many of mine, and we were ready to go to work to build floating homes. Well, they called from Costa Mesa and said, we've got a facility for you guys to work out of. It's on the other side of the hill, down in Apple Valley, Hesperia area near Victorville, California. There was a giant, coincidentally, big laboratory built with all the facilities. It had a machine shop, had a laboratory, it had offices. Everything was right there, and they said, this is for you guys, and the owners are donating it free of charge. Just to go ahead. They believe in you, and they want to see this happen. So here's this $1 million. $1 million was a lot of money then. It isn't so much now, but here's this multi-million-dollar facility just given to us to develop the crafts. So we were quite happy with that, and we decided let's go to work. And we did. We went down and got oriented with the facility and got all our equipment and everything together so that we could start experimenting. And my wife, and I'm not sure where she put where I was supposed to be. I did this at Laughlin too. So I'm sorry, but let's see. Okay. Okay. Well, for the most part, Carr was teaching me. He was a disciple of Nikola Tesla. He worked at a hotel where Tesla was staying, and Carr was going to school. He was taking art at the time in school, but he was just a desk clerk. But Tesla befriended him when Tesla always wanted peanuts to feed the pigeons with, so he'd call down and get Carr to bring up, and Carr got acquainted with him. Well, Carr was a very wonderful, very simple person, but he knew natural law like nobody I've ever known, and he got very, very close to Tesla, and like a sponge was picking up everything he could from him. And Tesla explained that he, in his time, was here on this earth to see that we advanced our civilization to an age of simplicity, which is nothing more or less than natural law that is understood and obeyed, and that he wanted to see all these. He started inventing everything, from radar, radio. Marconi was given credit for the radio, but actually Tesla was behind that, and you heard of the Tesla coil, and of course alternating current. Many things that he did, but he started progressing. He worked at the time with and for Westinghouse and Edison Company, and along the East Coast, and experimenting with what I mentioned earlier, ether technology. He understood that there's no limits to anything that you can do if you know who and what you are, and to use your mind to do everything. Once you've created it in your mind, it's nothing to put it on paper or even forget the paper, just build it. It's real simple. And he was teaching these things eventually to Carr when he explained that he ran into a situation with the backer. The backer at that time was J.P. Morgan. He was funding a lot of the stuff that Edison and Westinghouse were doing, the dynamo and the generators and so forth. And he was making progress. He built a small lab in Colorado Springs, and I was just up there 2 weeks ago, and it's gone. Everything's gone now. It's not there anymore. And then he built one in Wharton called Wardencraft in up in the New Jersey area on the East Coast. And he had got to the point where he could actually transmit power through the air or through the earth or around the earth without the use of wires. And he explained later to Carr that you could stick a pole 30 feet in the ground and 30 feet in the air and get all the power you wanted to run your whole household or small business or anything. There was nothing else you had to worry about if you knew what you were doing. Well, I guess Morgan got interested in where his money was going and called Tesla in one day. I'm just kind of putting these pieces together myself because I don't know exactly all the details. But he asked Tesla, well, what are we doing? What's going on? And Tesla said, well, you know what? I found that we don't need all these wires and telephone poles, that I can show you demonstrations, and here's some pictures of what we've been doing, and it's easy. That we live in a whole sea of energy, and there's energy all around us. There's no need to run these. And Morgan stopped him right there and said, wait a minute. We got copper mills, we got forests, and that's money. That means monetary system. That's jobs for people. And Tesla said, well, you know, this go through, people will not have to toil for their earnings every day. They can, if they were given the opportunity not to be charged for electricity and all the money that goes into building a system of copper and telephone poles, they would eventually get to who and what they were and bring out their natural talents. If they were always, we're all creative beings, and this is what Carr had shared with me, that there's no limit to what we can do if we know who and what we are. And if you give the opportunity to someone to take a breath instead of hurrying every day to chase a carrot to pay for the electric bills, they could find out that they wanted to be an artist, or they really wanted to be a fisherman, or whatever they wanted to do, and start developing that along the lines of harmony or in line with nature. And they would then incorporate a system of love so that their labor would be of love all the time. Everything they love to do would be profitable because it would keep the system going in a very harmonious way. Well, I know I'm kind of deviating here, but in essence, Morgan said, no, we can't have that. That's, there's no money in it, and you're going to have to tear down these ridiculous things that you built, and just forget it, Tesla. Well, that according to Carr, kind of broke Tesla's spirit, and he, even though he was honored with a lot of patents and different ideas that he came up with, he was never given full credit for what he came up with. Other people would find his patents and put their name on it, or some company would, you know, and there's so many semantics. They had, and even the electrical terms, there's a Dr. Watts, a Dr. Fahrenheit, a Dr. Ampere. All these things are talking about the same thing, which is energy. And he realized, instead of simplicity, they were choosing to stay in a very complicated system, which he didn't really want a part of. So he was, getting back to Carr again now, he was passing this on to Carr and telling him, I'm not going to make it in my time. They're not interested in what I have to offer, and I want you to carry on for me. Just take everything I can give you and see what you can do with it. And Carr was a very humble man, a very, very smart man, a very wise man, not necessarily smart, he was very wise. And so he took all the knowledge he could absorb, and later on started a small research and development facility in Baltimore, Maryland. And let's see, I got to look at my notes again, excuse me, I don't know where I'm at. I'm supposed to be somewhere. Oh, I've got to backtrack a little bit. When I was producing these little prototypes of simplicity, somehow the word got out. I don't know how, but one day, God's truth, before I even knew what the Men in Black were all about, 3 guys showed up at my door dressed in black suits. And they said, we're from the DeWalt School of Electronics, and we heard that you're quite a researcher and that you don't leave any rock unturned until you find out what works. And I said, yeah, that's right. He said, well, can we come in and talk to you? And I said, yeah, okay. So they said that they wanted to start seeing all my experiments. I had dozens and dozens of things that were working on natural law, that were actually working. My garden was feeding and watering itself. I had 100 different things that were taking care of themselves. And they were really curious. Well, they started getting a little too curious for my wife, and they were probing and fun things, and I think they were probably tape recording it too, I don't know, but my wife got real nervous and said, no, that's enough, no more, I'm going to have to ask you guys to leave right now. And because they wanted to know where I got the information and how could I know this stuff and da-da-da. And so my wife, short of getting a broom and him out, got him out of the house. And at that time, I had sent for a book from Yugoslavia on Tesla's patents, a great big thick book. It was $100 at that time, which was a lot of money, but it had all his patents in there. And one right after the other, I was duplicating those patents and making them all work, and I was really excited. I figured, well, someday I'll fit somewhere in the system. And my wife said, well, it's not going to be now with these guys showing up. You better just get rid of this stuff and get that book out of here, because at that time, I had to send away for the book. It was, I don't know if it was outlawed or whatever, but every bookstore I went to, they said, we can't get you that book. There's no way. No, that's not a book that we can get. So I found a way to get it, and I got it. So that spooked my wife. She said, no, we got to get rid of the book. So at that time, I'd heard of a guy by the name of George Van Tassel. He was down in the desert area, Joshua Tree, I think, California, by a place called Giant Rock. And I just got this, when I get in with my creating with nature, it's like I go up, my elevator goes the capacity of normal. I just go out of my wife said I was totally out of my head all the time, but I would get into this state of mind that was actually wonderful, because I could see how simple everything was, and I knew what I could do. And I had heard about Van Tassel and a thing that he was working on that equated to what I was working on, which was magnetic nature, called the integratron. And it was for a health thing, a healing, using sound waves and music and acoustical vibrations in this dome, giant dome. He was going to reach the resonant frequency of any ailment, you know, the molecular structure level, going to the cause instead of dealing with the effects like our medicine does. They find out what's wrong with you and give you a Band-Aid and have you come back and charge you more money, and instead of going to what was causing the problem. And Van Tassel knew that if you study the cause, it's usually an obstruction of energy somewhere in your body. It'll start from a mental state by a lot of what's known as negative thinking. But if you keep pounding yourself, bombarding your subconscious, I guess, with negative ideas, eventually your subconscious is like a genie. It says, okay, whatever you say, and it gives it right back to you the way you feed it. So he realized that after a while, these thoughts start to crystallize. They slow down the blood flow, they slow down the electrical, the chemical currents in your body, and they will start to crystallize and slow down. They become more dense than the radiant field that your body's operating at. And when that happens, they start into a decaying mode. Instead of coming into life, they're going out of life. And that in the integratron, excuse me, I think I've got it. I'm sorry. No. I have to apologize. I'm sorry. And my wife's been talking to me for a week. Don't you dare do that again, what you did at Laughlin. Down a little more. Right there. Thanks. 20 minutes? Okay, I got to hurry. Okay. Well, I'm going to speed this up. I got a lot to tell you, and it has to do with consciousness, not to do with the nuts and bolts of building spaceships, because I've gone far beyond that. When we got into Apple Valley, anyway, about the cancer things in the cells, if you can radiate at that frequency, you can manipularly break up that cluster of bad energy and get it flowing again, and effectively heal anything. There's no reason that you can't heal anything. You don't have to do anything else, but just understand what you're doing. So I took this book and I drove down. I didn't even know where it was, but I heard about it, and I drove down without a map, and I found it. It was out in the middle of the desert. And as I got there, I walked into what was a little restaurant right by Giant Rock, and George Van Tassel was coming out, and we looked at each other right in the eye, and this strange feeling, it was a wonderful feeling, but a strange feeling came over me, and I said, I got something for you. He says, yeah, I know, I was expecting you, you know. And man, since then, I understand a lot more than I did then, but that kind of, you know, gave me a lot more reasons to believe there's more to life than we think there is. So I gave him the book, and I went out, before I drove back, I went out on a side of a knoll, and I laid down, and I looked up in the sky, and not hundreds, but thousands of these craft were going all through the air, and they'd come over where I was, and they'd come down low, and they'd stay there a few minutes, and they'd go up and move all over. I could see details and light, beautiful light show. Well, I didn't know till later, till I talked to some other people. They said that, well, that was probably because you gave him the book. That was kind of a signal that that was what you're supposed to do, confirmation from nature. I said, okay, that's great. And from that, I learned that if you do a good deed, if you watch for it, you'll always get confirmation in ways you least expect it, but it'll always come back to you, and it'll make you feel good. Well, I'll kind of get through that because I got a lot more to tell you. We got down to Apple Valley. This is the utron we used in the craft. This is if you're familiar with who Plato was, you know, Socrates and Plato. These are called platonic solids. There's 5 of them. There's the tetrahedron, double tetrahedron, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this was the essence of our operation. It's called the utron. It is a circle, it's a square, it's a double tetrahedron, it's a equilateral triangle. It's all those in one unit. And when you subject this to a magnetic field, let's see if I can get to it here. I'm sorry. I just want to go down. How do I go down? Oh, there. Okay, thanks. Ooh, oh, there it goes. I just want to go that one there. Thanks. There it is. Okay. I want to stop there, but well, there it is. When you put this at right angles to a magnetic field, roughly at right angles, you reach resonant frequency of the same thing that the hummingbird does and the bumblebee. Here's a picture of it. This is the utron. The neutron's in the center. You create what's commonly be called the 0 point. You've nullified all the forces of gravity around you, and you can levitate. Let's see. It's okay. I think I can get it. Here is we put up a sign there. This is our lab in Hesperia, and we eventually we experimented with different prototypes. And this one experiment. It was a 3-foot model, and it was sitting on the workbench, and we fired it up. It just had a hum to it, a beautiful hum, and while it was humming, I was touching the edge of the craft, and if I can find it again, this little craft here, I was touching the edge of it, and after it got up to a certain frequency, I found out I was getting softer and softer, and eventually my fingers went right through the metal, right through the top of the craft, and it was a wonderful experience, but I couldn't understand it. I mean, it was kind of, you know, different. So Carr said, no, that's completely natural. He says, don't worry about it. He says, let me explain to you guys what nature, what you are. You are not who you think you are. You're not a body. You're a mass, if you will, of energy that cannot be created or destroyed according to the own academic science of this planet. So if you're energy, and you understand what energy is, and you know the natural laws that govern and guide and direct energy, it's simple. And you were reaching different frequencies that were harmonizing with the surroundings, and for the sake of this particular experiment, you were putting your hand right through the metal. It was energy to energy. It was all vibrating at the same level. So I thought that was pretty neat. I'm going to hurry it up because I got a couple more things. Half an hour? Okay, thanks. The next experiment, which was the next day or two, was a craft similar to this. I've got a picture of it, but I don't dare go down because I'll get lost again, but it's here. Well, maybe I can. Let's see. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay. I'm gonna get out of this one. I didn't get. Yeah, I'm gonna get into the other one. Oh, thanks a lot. Yeah. Uh-huh. That's great. Oh, this one? Oh, great. Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so what happened in the next experiment we had, and Carr wasn't even in on this one where I put my hands in. He was in the other room somewhere. But the next one, he was in the room with us, and he said, "Okay, we're gonna go to the next level." And, oops, well, it's flashing. That's okay. I'll explain these as we go. This is an underground house I built, an exact replica of the 45-foot craft that we built. I was trying to build them in Arizona, and I ran into trouble with the building codes. They said, yeah, it's flashing. It keeps going. Oh, what did I do? And so anyway, this next experiment, we vibrated this thing, beautiful hum. It really feels good when you get up into frequencies. Your whole body responds to it. It's synergetic in nature, if you will. You kind of become a part of it. And what happened was, oh, thanks. What happened is it vibrated to the certain frequency, and then it, just like you'd see on Star Trek, where the people disappear in those tubes, it just started breaking up, and it disappeared. We were standing around, it disappeared. And we got kind of excited and was wondering, you know. And Carr was laughing because he knew what he was doing, and we weren't sure what we were doing. But he said, "That's fine, boys." He says, "I'm having a little trouble knowing where they're landing, but it might land on somebody's table. I don't know, but come back. But he said that's teleportation, and he did this in Tesla did this in Colorado, and way back when Tesla's lab was there, he was teleporting things all over the place. I want to get this in before I don't want to miss this. So anyway, long story short, he explained that to build anything with magnetic power, what I'm holding in my hand right now is the simplicity of eternal and forever transportation and habitation. This is a magnetic field. There's two magnets. And when you can see and comprehend what I just did right there, you will see spaceships everywhere already here. We're just not up to the level of being able to comprehend what's operating them. We're thinking of linear propulsion, and spaceships don't operate, at least the ones we worked with, don't operate on linear propulsion at all. They operate on magnetic fields. And when you vibrate, something like getting excited at a wedding or getting excited at a good spaghetti dinner or something, you know, you get up to a certain level, and you change your mood. And as you do that, you change your consciousness. And when you change your consciousness, that's a real thing. People think, oh, well, and I was told in school that was your imagination, you're supposed to stop, don't dream. But if it wasn't for your imagination, nothing in this room or anywhere else would exist. It's all imaging before it manifests. And the problem that we have is not enough understanding and patience to let it happen. Well, anyway, I better get to the actual demonstration. We then went to the 45-foot craft, and I was privileged and honored to be one of the selected people to get on board to operate this craft. And Carr explained it to us, and he said, "No, your brain is limited. Your job in the third dimension is to operate the body, and anything outside of that, it will ferociously reject. It will fight it. It doesn't exist. It can't happen. So you're going to have to just calm down and just forget everything your brain's trying to tell you, and just let things happen the way they happen." He said, when you get inside, you'll be guided by the frequencies that we're going to oscillate inside the craft, and you'll know what to do. Don't try to think. Don't try to do anything. It will guide you. So we did. We got inside, and inside there was a big, like a gyroscope, and in the center of that was a crystal ball, big ball, and a laser shining up from the bottom. And the light broke up the spectrum into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different colors: red, 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 blue, blue, all the way around, from infrared to ultraviolet. And it was gorgeous. It was beautiful. And he says, well, we're going to go downrange 10 miles, roughly, to an area which equates to the color or the frequency, the vibration of aquamarine. And so just relax, clear your mind. Don't think of anything. Just let it happen and focus on what's happening. And I'm going to cut it short because in the interest of time, I got a couple more things. But what happened, this ball started from multicolors. It started going to one color, and that color was aquamarine. And it lit up the whole inside of the ship. It was really, it felt very good, and it was brilliant. And then the next thing I know, I could hear Carr, and I don't know how we communicated. We didn't have cell phones or anything. He said, okay, now get out of the ship and walk around, pick up stones and sticks and put them in your pocket, and then get back on the ship. And so we did. Now, I don't remember this when it happened. In retrospect, later on, it took me a couple of weeks to get to what I'm talking about now, because I couldn't remember any of this happening. But since that's what we did, we went downrange, got out, picked up all these rocks and sticks and put them in our pocket. And Carr says, okay, we're back. Get out and let's go into debriefing. And I said, well, and I talked to the other two guys, two other engineers with me. And I said, did you feel anything? He said, no. Well, we didn't even move, as far as I was concerned. And so Carr said, come on, let's go into debriefing. And I said, it didn't work, did it? And he said, oh, you don't think so? And he said, check your pockets. Well, we did, and out came all these stones and sticks and everything that we were carrying. We had no idea at that time how they got there. How many minutes? 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Okay, well, anyway, he said, well, experience was in and out of time. It's the teleportation. He says it's really, really simple. You vibrated at the same frequency as aquamarine, which was determined to be that sector that we had chosen for the landing spot. And then we teleported there. The time that you left here and returned was about 5 seconds. The craft lifted off the ground and disappeared, and then reappeared in about 5 seconds. In our time, later, when in retrospect, was about 15 minutes that I figured. And he explained the time difference is irrelevant, that time is a creation that we create to measure things. It's only a measuring device. It has a beginning and an end. But in essence, there is no such time. There's only infinity. There's no beginning. There's no beginning and there's no end to anything. And that's including who and what you are. And you've got to always remember that you're a creative being, that you are already an immortal being, and that when you stop getting tired of chasing the carrot and realize who you are, when you wake up to who you really are, start changing your reality momentarily, daily, weekly, monthly. The whole world around you will begin to change. And that effectively started happening in my life when I realized what he was talking about. And ever since those experiences, I've never had to worry about anything. I don't think, and I don't choose. The world that we live in the third dimension is a duality world. You can say this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. And you'll never get anywhere because you're chasing your tail. And what I found that I do is I just get really still and I just follow wherever I'm led. I just go with a trust or a knowing that everything, and I'm always on time. Even when people say I'm late, I know I'm always on time. And and it works. I always find a parking places and everything. It's just an alignment with the simple laws of nature, of knowing who and what you are, and that we're all immortal, and that if you want to change, you start realizing that even the furniture, when you wake up in the morning, it's not the same furniture it was yesterday, because everything in life is in motion. We're spinning right now at close to 1,000 miles an hour. Everything is relative, and we don't realize that. But that furniture is also spinning, and everything in that room is changing molecularly and so forth. And we're taking pictures with these cameras in nanoseconds. We're creating all this reality, which is what we call reality. It's actually illusion. We're creating all this illusion. And that can be changed in moments, or in days, or in hours, or in years, or in eons, if you want to wait that long. But it can all be changed. And what I decided to do with my mission here is to see floating homes and floating cities and floating countries, is to see that it gets done. And I had to go through a death experience. I went to the hospital, I had 2 knee replacements, and I died. And I realized then that experience was for me to understand what death was. And I found out there's really to God. There's no such thing as death. What happened, it was a metamorphosis. And my wife and my best friend were there, and the doctor said, you better call a priest, nothing more we can do for you, and all that. But I went through this metamorphosis, which I realized the old me died to that reality. And that's going on somewhere in the universe, that illusion. Or it dissipated, I don't know. But this is me. I came back with even a stronger urge to see that I get these spaceships and these floating homes done. And it just keeps moving. And I'm no longer afraid on any level of death. I mean, now I will challenge all systems because I know they can think they kill this body, but they can't kill my spirit because that goes on. And that same spirit was in Tesla and Carr and Asmini, and my time's up. And I guess I'll run through this real fast. I went to Arizona, bought 12 acres of land, and decided to build a, wait a minute, let's see if I can do it. I just take another minute. Yeah, just keep looking at it. Okay, thanks. I bought 12 acres of land on the north side of a hill. I'll get them later. On the north side of a hill, they said, well, you can't, there's no solar there. And I was going to replicate the 45-foot craft. And inside that, I was going to start building little prototypes like we had. We were flying them around Apple Valley years ago. This is in the late 50s and early 60s. People thought they were flying saucers. Well, anyway, we bought this piece of land. We dug it out. The only thing we did was hire a backhoe to dig the hole, because my wife and I started digging it, and we gave up after about 3 days. We couldn't do it. And we went deeper and deeper and deeper. Finally got the hole dug. There's the hole. We hit bedrock at 9 feet, which that was Mother Nature saying that's where you stop. That's where you're supposed to go. And because we were guided by nature, we've learned how to follow her. If it's not right, don't pursue it. If you don't feel good about it, don't go there, because that's nature trying to tell you there's a simpler way. Well, anyway, a little trailer we lived in. This was a root cellar that we put onto it. We hauled flagstone, which was free for the taking, and we were going to build the whole thing out of flagstone. Well, I started to build a root cellar out of flagstone. It took me almost 2 weeks to get up less than a foot. I couldn't get things even. I didn't know how to do it. So my wife said, forget it, we're ordering cinder block. So we did. We ordered the cinder block, got it in there, started building the house up. And this went up in 1 day. I went up 2 feet in 1 day with the cinder blocks. And we kept building and building. And I kept, when I went in to get the plans, I wanted a levitation device. And they said, no, there's no such thing. You've got to anchor it. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. And then I went in for a septic system. I had one in Sweden, which was recyclable. Everything in it was recyclable. You could use the methane gas for cooking. The fertilizer was pure. You could put it in your garden. And I wanted that. They said, no, you can't use that. You got to have a leach line and all the septic things. Well, anyway, I ran into a lot of problems. Here, it just went up higher and higher. At this point, there's just the two of us, my wife and I, building this. And if I put a stone in, I'd have to, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night and realize it was crooked. I'd have to go out in the middle of the night with a flashlight and straighten it. Because if you don't follow those little things in nature, from that point on, when you go crooked, it's going to keep going crooked. You got to get it straight, and you got to stay straight, or it won't work. So anyway, we kept going with it, and we had a nice view. It was a nice place. And all the dirt we hauled out, we made a parking lot out front, and I had solar panels for electricity, and photovoltaic electricity, and solar hot water. We had air wells. We brought the water right out of the air, so we didn't have to haul water or anything. We were totally self-sufficient. We had computers, we had color TV, we had everything, and it didn't cost us a dime, but they wouldn't let us get it off They wouldn't. So I met a guy by the name of Walter Baumgartner. He's a scientist. And he said, well, I've got a place in Magdalena, New Mexico, where we can build them. He says, it's deserted way out in the middle of nowhere, and if you'll work with me back and forth, we can start building them there. So my wife and I decided we'd go back and forth, and we started building little spaceships over in New Mexico. And here's the, we called it Blue Star because we were coming down this road one night, down that road, and this blue, whatever, came down the road in front of us, and we tried to catch it, and it looked like a blue star, so we called it Blue Star. Well, we didn't know anything, the significance of a blue star, until we started talking with the Hopi Indians, a very, 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 very high spiritual sign with them. Anyway, we bartered for all this lumber, and we bartered for the even the stones. We bartered for those, and we kept going up, and we learned how to build the top. In a corner of our, right here, was a spider web, and we called her Charlotte for Charlotte's Web, and she taught us every morning how to build a web and how to get strength out of the web. So that's following natural law, and so we learned it. We started to put our roof on. We segmented it like this, and then we put 40 tons of dirt on, not dirt, but granite, decomposed granite on the top of it, and it all locked in real, real tight and firm. And no load-bearing walls were necessary. Everything was free and open down below. I'll show you. I know I'm out of time. Okay. So then here's the getting more completed. We put skylights all around it. Wasn't necessary. We decided to put one skylight over the root cellar. It was enough. Our solar hot water acted as a solar oven as well. We had a garden, and if you ever go garden, look into putting them in a round patch instead of a rectangle or a square. The Indians taught us this, that the animals, for some reason, they don't like over a round area into your garden, and we didn't have any trouble with the animals eating all our stuff, so it worked. Well, anyway, we insulated and tarped it. Let's see. Here was the underneath. This is the solarium here. We're going to have a Lexan spiral staircase that illuminated as you stepped on the stairs. They would light up as you go up on the... And a waterfall coming down with the lights inside the rocks. Let's see. We kept going up. Oh, this was our clock. Those mirrors we put around there, we learned how to use them down below as our clock. We could tell within, very, very close, within minutes, what time of day it was because of the reflection that would shine down below. Tell what time of day it was. Solar panel. We started burning it in on all sides. This was our little solar oven in our hot water. We learned about air wells. You can bring water right out of the air. It's quite simple too. You don't need to drill a well. This was snow. Here was our driveway that we built from all that dirt that we took. Here was the front of it. And we were hoping that someday we could at least start building the prototypes inside of this and start, you know, again, being active in building spaceships. But it just, everywhere we went with the government there, they just didn't allow for any activity like that. So we were really discouraged. Well, I guess I'll kind of round that off. Thanks for your patience. I'm sorry it took so long, but...